In the previous video, we introduced CSS or Cascade style sheet, and we saw how we can work directly in line, stylizing our elements in the page, which could be a paragraph or a heading or a table. And also we saw that we can put the CSS directly on the head so that we don't stylize just one single element, but all the element in that page. Now, there is a third way that we already mentioned, and it is to put the CSS outside the HTML page so that it works not only on one page, but on the overall site. So we have three methods. First method is inline CSS. The second one is in the document or in the page, so in page CSS. Third one will be the external CSS. And that requires a link to the HTML pages. Now, once we define a CSS, whether it's in the page or outside the HTML page, we can work with the CSS designer and we can use selectors. So we can choose something in the page and stylize that something using a specific selection, like this one here, for example. This appeared because I was inside the table selecting one specific type of cell. So this is the selector. If I go down here, you can see that this is TD. So this is part of the table. If I click here and I see the navigation down here, this is to show you all the various containers and the various elements that are usually contained into another container. So basically TD is contained into TR. TR is contained into TBody, which is the table body. The table body is contained into table, and everything is contained into body. Now, suggestions appear here with the DOM panel. So here you can just see the hierarchy again. So we have HTML, and which is the main container actually. Then we have head and body. The head is where we put the CSS if we want to define it in the page. The body is where we put the content. So we have a heading, we have a heading tree, and then a table. And inside the table, we have the body, etc., etc. So everything works with containers and objects that are inside the container. So everything works as a hierarchy with different levels of importance. So once we define a selector, then we can define CSS properties or rules. So we can say, okay, this has to be, if it's a text, for example, it has to be colored this way, it has to be with these sides, etc., etc. You can see you have different properties here that you can add. Some concerns the layout, some are about the text, some others about the borders, the background, and others here that you can add. And you can also activate show set. Show set will show you only the properties or the rules that have been used to stylize a particular element. So if I select this H1, you can see that if I do show set, it's showing me that I'm using this color, and I can also edit it from here. It's showing me that I'm using also a particular font, a style, a size, a text alignment. Here also another more advanced effect, which is the text shadow. So now I can change a little bit also this. Now this becomes like a glowing effect because we have a black background and we have a white color for the text shadows, but this works also as a shadow. So let's say I want to stylize this. I'm going to create a new selector, which I already did before actually. And now here I'm going to deactivate show set because I don't see anything. And here I will apply something. So let's apply a shadow. I'm going to go here in the text shadow, and start to increase these values. Now you can see the shadow appearing. It's a little bit too sharp, so let's make it blur a little bit. I'm using just pixels right now, but we can use also other relative units. And the color, let's do like black. So now we can see the actual shadow. Where do we find this new rule? We're going to find it in the head of the document because we choose to work in here and not externally. Now, another really important panel we saw when we click here inside the document is down here, the properties panel. So depending on what we select, we see something else here, something different. If we now have some sort of rules, this is not going to give us the edit inline, but it's going to we can go directly to the CSS designer and edit the rule directly in there. So we need this probably at the beginning. Then we will just use the CSS designer. But also here, really important is the access to the page properties. Again, when we define here the appearance, this is going to go for all the elements in the page, and this is going to go in the head, so inside the document. You can define the general appearance for the text, the background. We change here the color of the background, for example, and then if I say apply, I should see the difference. Let's just wait before we refresh. Here we can define also a background image, a color for the background in HTML. Then we have links, so we can change the link color into, usually it's blue. We can do it, anything else. And also the visited links. So the visited are the ones that we already saw. And then we have the rollover. So when we roll over with the mouse, it's going to show us another color. Let's make this pretty bright. And then we have active links, which are the links that are actually used. And here we can choose if we want to underline the links or we don't want to underline, or only show the line when we go on rollover, or hide the line when we are on rollover. So let's do like show underline on rollover. So this is styling the links, and this one here, the headings. So we can choose for each heading define style. We can see we only have one, which we style through the CSS designer, but we can still change it also from here. And we can also use fonts. We can choose other fonts. We can also upload and use other fonts. So the rest is like more generic. So let's do OK, and we can see now the changes. Now let me create a link. So we said that to create a link, so let's create it here. Link is enough to select it and click on this little chain, or going down here in the HTML properties and define a link right here. We can also just type an hashtag like this. This will be an empty link. So you can see the rollover effect right here. When I go over, it's gonna show the underline and the different color. Now again, everything goes right here in the head. So if I want to change, for example, the color for the over, I can go here and change it into something else. This is an hexadecimal code, and we saw that we can define this using websites or using here the selector. Okay, so let's make something different, like red. Okay, so we can see it better. And there you go. Now we can work directly in the code, whether it's CSS or HTML. So you can see we are getting more and more complex. I hope that you're following. For the beginners. For the more expert, this is a little bit more challenging, but I think it will be nothing too complex. So now we're going to go the third way, which is the external CSS. Let's jump back here to the CSS designer. Here we have the selectors, and then we have the properties. And up here we have the sources. Now in the sources, we don't have anything except for the style, which is included in the page. So let's say we want to add a new source for the CSS. So I'm going to click on plus, and I can attach an existing CSS. If I saved already a CSS, I can define in the page, as we did. I can create a new CSS file. So let's create a new CSS file. I need to choose a URL or a directory, which is going to be still inside our folder. So you can see here I have chosen lesson 6, but this is lesson 8. So we can create a new folder and put it in there. But right now I just want to show you here in lesson 6. So I created a folder called CSS just by doing right click, creating new folder, and call it CSS. And in this folder I will save my CSS. I'm going to call this external CSS. This is going to be the format is going to be a CSS, so style sheet files, and that's the directory, and it's going to be relative to the document, not the site root.